Hey, welcome to another edition of the Get Made podcast. You know, as men, sometimes we don't really, or people don't really understand what it feels like when it's loneliness or you feeling like you're isolated, right? And sometimes we don't even really figure it out. We don't really understand it. And so what we do is suffer a lot of times in silence, men, and the women that love them need to understand this. We suffer in silence. We really are in a position of where we're not really talking. Now, it's we're not really talking, and we're not really confiding in anyone, right? So what happens is it continues to eat you up more and more and more on the inside, right? It gives you things like high blood pressure and your cortisol is kind of high because you have high stress. And now be a high performing person, a person who go out here who works hard every day. You're entrepreneur, you're management, you have management, you're owner of a business, and you're really on the grind a lot. And you're married and you have kids. Maybe you got kids by a former wife that you got a couple sets of kids, and you're really trying to stay on top of all of that, but nobody understands your pain. And why they don't understand it is because you're not telling it. You're really capping that thing and holding that thing on the inside to where at any given time you finna stroke out or you finna crash out, and it's not a good thing. So what I am looking to present to a lot of my brothers today is something that we call micro support. Because a lot of times we often hear, we need to get you a therapist, or you need to do this, you need to, everything needs a therapist. Now, everything doesn't need a therapist. All right. It really doesn't. Right. You're not suffering from mental illness and things of that nature there. Right. So that level of care is probably not really what you truly need, but you actually need something. Now, I'm not telling people not to go to therapy, right? And I'm not telling people that therapists are not needed, because they're very much needed. And they're needed by a lot of us, a lot of men, because truly we are people who suffer from different trauma from, you know, years gone past, childhood trauma, young adult trauma, teenage trauma, young adult trauma, and even for some of us who are a little older, life transition trauma, right? And what that feels like, right? And so I'm not saying that we don't need therapists. A person doesn't need a therapist, right? Because in some instances you really do, right? But what I am saying is that, and also I want to make sure that you understand too that dealing with somebody who's qualified. But what I am saying is that we need micro support. And what does micro support look like? It is a friend, it is a group, it is a confidant, it is a coach, or it is a counselor, or it's a mentor, or it can be a number of things. It doesn't have to be this large scale situation. You know, it really is being in a position of confiding in someone who is going to be supportive. What we mean by support is that they're not amening everything that you're saying. They're not just in agreement with everything that you're saying, They are going to hold you accountable. They are going to tell you some hard truths, right? They are going to say some things that you need to hear, but you may not want to hear, right? But that's okay. And we shouldn't duck out because we don't want to hear the truth of matters or even let anyone know our truths, right? For myself, I have my micro support system, right? I have, a number of people, my circle is relatively small. I have a number of people who I contact, who I have, in-depth conversation with, who I look for in guidance, be it spiritual, be it intellectual, be it mental or emotional, be it physical or social, right? I look for them to be able to give me some guidance on things that I may be going through, some things I might have experienced or experienced. And I even have a therapist. I ain't gonna tell you a lie. I even take it to the top that even have a therapist, right? To be able to be as healthy as I possibly can, right? Because at the end of the day, this stress, man, for many years, stress was truly killing me, right? Stress was really taking me out. Part of something that I was told from by one of my doctors, even with my eyes, is that I was dealing with so much stress and my blood pressure and everything that was actually one of the reasons why my eyesight was accelerating. My loss of my eyesight was accelerating is because of the stress that I was under, right? And so there are a multitude of reasons why we are sick. We have a lot of alcoholism or drug use, or we have a lot of things that we try to use as coping mechanisms that really are unhealthy. And we try to use those as micro support systems. Some people think, just keeping this 100 at this point, some people think going out buying sex is therapeutic. I don't understand why, but they do, right? They say they pay her to leave, right? But that's not a good coping mechanism, right? That's actually even more harmful, quiet as it's kept, that's even more harmful to society, right? Because there is the exploitation, even though she's saying, yeah, she's with it, there is an exploitation in that, right? And so we are then looking at situations where we are not coping well, right? We're not coping well. So a lot of us out here who are not coping well. I talk to men every day who are not coping well, who, you know, I mean, they kind of pay me to tell me some of these things, right? And they're using a micro support system in that instance, right? But it took them so much. It took so much for them to get to that space where they even can contact me, right? And I have them try to form healthier relationships with other men. And see, here's what some men do, especially within our black experience, right? What we do is we tend to lean on women a lot more, right? We tend to talk to women a lot more. We seem like we could open up to women a lot more. It's hard for men to actually form relationships with other men, right? And so what we do is we start leaning in support of women. Now, I'm not saying a woman, support is not good. I'm not saying that. But sometimes it's misused and overused, right? is misused and is overused, right? To the point that we only talk to women and we don't really confide in men, right? And some of it's because, we don't want to appear weak to another man, or we don't want to tell another man our business, or all this old type of stuff here. A lot of foolishness, a lot of bravado that really has no place, or machismo that has no place, but they have cultivated us on that type of foolishness, right? But the reality of it is, in order for me to be better, I need another man that I can kind of bounce out off of, right? And I'm not talking to every man. And even to the point of show you something that kind of, in a sense, has substituted women in some degree, is the social media. You have a lot of people, especially some men, who are going on social media telling their business, right? And letting people know all of their business, right? And so, you know, I, I understand this game. There's a marketing game to some of this as well. I don't see people using it as a marketing game. I think they're using it as a therapy session. And that's not probably the best way to do it. Keep your stuff offline and give it to somebody real, and have real conversations with some people, and then get some skills and learn how to become emotionally stable, or being able to be balanced. And we're not really doing that. And a lot of that too is because we have been cultivated by leaning on women, that, and still, instead of turning to other men, and even though we're not turning to women, we're turning to social media, right? So a man may say, well, at least I ain't talking to no other women. I ain't, dumping in on other women. Yeah, but you're still not using will, because now you're exposing yourself to a whole bunch of stuff that you probably shouldn't expose yourself to, right? Nobody say vulnerability has to be foolish, right? And giving a multitude of people your business, your stuff going viral, giving your stuff, giving all your stuff to a whole bunch of people that don't know you, allows you to be opened up to a lot of criticisms and critiques that's not necessary. These cats don't know you, right? These folks don't know you. Telling your business, they don't know you. They just, they sit out there and just, only thing they know is a 2 minute video on you, something that you said, or 10 minute if you're on TikTok, right? That's all they know of you. And they gonna come out and type in a whole dissertation about who you are, and they get real brave with a keyboard and on behind a keyboard, and that's not healthy, right? And some of that kind of still makes people withdraw, right? And so you have people sitting alone, you have men sitting alone, you have men turning into alcohol and different things in nature there. I did a podcast earlier this year with a brother. His name's Calvin. Man, I've been working with Calvin just that long, for so long. His last name has slipped me just that quick, right? But Calvin was doing a lot of things in the space of male loneliness, right? And and how he talks about his father, and how he even started his podcast, where he was get with his father once a week, and his father was in, they play old school music or whatever, and some of the things that they were having conversation, and this is how him and his father tapped back into each other, right? And so it's it was a beautiful experience listening to that, right? And so you're talking about male loneliness, male isolation, and even some instances, male seclusion, or seclusion, right? Where they are solitude. I won't even call it seclusion, call it solitude, right? This is when somebody's purposely At this point, they're saying they're purposefully doing this. Well, at this point, it's male solitude. I want to be by myself versus I'm by myself. I want to be by myself, right? They give the excuse of wanting to be by themselves, right? That's not healthy, right? That's still not healthy. Everybody needs to have some time to themselves, of course. I have a man cave. I go in my man cave and I sit down and chill and everything else, and read my books or listen to different audio lectures or whatever. And yeah, I get that time. I get that time, but I don't do it because I have no other experiences to fall back on. I do it because, that's a time for me. And then I have the times for other places where I don't rely on self to have the answer. I get the answers from people who I respect. I respect them. I respect their opinions. I know their opinions come from good places, even when they're telling me something that I look dead wrong about, you know. Um, and to the fact that, I rely on them pretty regularly. I tap into them pretty regularly. And they also tap into me, right? And or they have their own systems, micro support systems that they tap into, right? And so what is a micro support system? It's really 3 to 5 core people who you're really working with, um, who has no problem with telling you, who you confide in, and they try to help you in the best ways possible, right? Even if it's just being an ear to listen to them, to listen to you, right? This is that, right? I'm saying we need to start doing this with men as men. We need to start tapping into men. And because a lot of you out here have micro support systems, but they're women, right? They are women, right? And so you don't have a problem telling a woman your secrets, your innermost, secrets and all this old type of stuff here, right? And a lot of that sometimes is game, but that's probably for another podcast. But nevertheless, you're tapping into women and you're getting that coddle that you've probably been looking for, you've been dealing with and all your life, and it continues on, right? And or you've had men, or if you had men in your life, those men were so dominating or dominant over you, right? That it it left you in such a state that you didn't want. I mean, they kind of drug you in a sense, right? And or shamed you in some regards, right? Some regard, right? And they shamed you, right? And so when you are then trying to figure out a friendship or having a friendship that you have then allowed to excel or ascend to a micro support system, this is a good thing, right? If you have this type of friends or these type of friends or associates that you can do this with, right? So I am saying that predominantly male, make those people predominantly male, right? Um, I'm saying probably no more than 10 people, right? At the most as your inner circle. That's a lot of people, to be honest with you. That's a lot of people, right? But I'm saying between 3 to 10 people, right? Um, Making sure that you and your support and your micro support system, you have tools. Because at the end of the day, it's about gaining tools in order to be healthy, right? This is what this is really about: gaining tools, getting tools in order to be healthy. So you may be reading books, right? You might be getting certain, and you might be listening to lectures, or you might be listening to other podcasts, or you might be listening to a variety of other things, right? That allows you to then start formulating some ideas, looking at yourself, because that's the main thing too. And this is what we call, we're dealing with grounded masculinity, because the main thing is about an awareness, being competent, being consistent, being congruent, making connections, and having some care, right? These four things, these four competencies for grounded masculinity, right? When you are then having that, and or I won't even dismiss this. Even being in group settings can be a good situation, right? Um, you know, God willing, I'm looking to even start some groups in 2026, some male groups in 2026. But I really, tell you the truth, I really don't want, and if I have a variety of different groups, I don't want each one of these groups to be no more than 10 people per group, right? Keeping that situation as intimate, as small and intimate as possible as you possibly can, right? Because the bigger the group, in my opinion, kind of the more control you'll lose over it, right? And so, and now it might be three or four different groups that might be taking place. And each one of them is a cohort, right? And that's okay. But being a part of a group is going to be good, because even in a group, you're going to form relationships, right? You're going to form camaraderies. You're going to be in a position of building bonds, if you will, that will allow you to be healthy, to sustain health, right? A healthy mindset. And this is what more we're talking about: healthy mindset, a healthy heart, right? This is what we're really talking about. And so I want us to really look at this for some of us who are, checking this out. They're using this term now, micro support systems, right? Okay, it was called something else yesterday, right? you know, it, it, but whatever we want to call it, I'm giving you the understanding of what it's called technically today, right? And the idea though is to build bonds with someone, with a group of people who you can then confide in, who you can learn from, who you can have some reciprocity with. You can actually share with them when they may even start confiding in you a little bit more. Or, y'all have this situation where y'all having conversations. I know me and a brother, we he takes me to Juma every Friday, right? And it's a beautiful thing. And we go out and eat and whatnot after Juma. But then we have some fabulous conversations, right? And we ain't always agreeing, right? And our point of views, we all have our own POV at this point, right? A lot of times, and and so we sharing. He's a younger brother; he's younger than me, right? And so we're having different conversations. I learned certain things from him just listening to him and seeing what someone who's younger than me, how they're thinking, right? And because I have to understand that. I have to understand where you're coming from and understand where we're going, right? But that's a micro support system, right? Everybody in a prayer line, even though we're going to benefit each other, it's not going to be my micro support system. Even though we're praying next to each other, and I love the benefit of you praying with me and I'm praying with you, right? But we may not rock like that when it comes to having in-depth conversations about personal stuff, right? So I want us to be able to understand that just because I'm in a group of people don't mean that we kind of just doing it like that, right? And just because we shaking hands and we showing love to each other don't mean that I can kind of drop my stuff out on you too, or you can drop all your stuff on me as well. We don't have that. We don't have that bond as of yet. Those things are developed and they develop over time, right? But we have to, brothers, I'm serious, we have to start doing this though, because we are dying. We are killing ourselves. We are not having a quality of life as we get older because of the stress, because of the stress that we have, because of those sicknesses that we incur, because of the mental anguish that we are going, the frustrations that we are going through. We're killing ourselves. And the people around us, i.e., our family, our wives, our family, our children, all these stuff, they're not benefiting from us on a higher level, at a higher frequency. They may be benefit from you paying bills or anything in nature there, but they're not benefiting from you or from a higher frequency, right? Your nurturing, your caring, your expression of love and in a healthy way, your communication of love, right? Your communication of concern, your communication of care. We're not doing that. We're not communicating these things. We're talking in command and talking in demand versus talking in care and generosity and love and things of that nature there, right? Took me years to get to this point, fellas. It took me years to get here. I'm here now, and I would be derelict of my duty and not trying to pass this to the people. That's what we do here at the Get Made podcast, right? We build a manhood, demand accountability, promoting development, and providing tools of enrichment, right? That's what's happening here. And this is as I bring other guests on, and when I'm doing some of my podcast solo, the main emphasis is those four things right there. This is what this is all about, right? And how does that then allow us to stand up with one another, stand on each other's shoulders, or pull each other up and help each other to be the best men that we possibly can be, right? Because contrary to popular opinion, the black male Muslim population is suffering from the same thing a lot of the black male population is suffering from. So don't get that twisted. You're not excluded. Why? Because you're taking on some of the same mindsets that they are taking on. Right? So we're kind of doing some of the same things, but calling ourselves Muslim. We're thinking it along the same lines, but we call ourselves Muslim. Right? And I'm not questioning your Islam. I'm saying that we're doing certain things that is hindering us for achieving the ultimate in Islam. That's all I'm saying. So I ain't saying that nobody's not Muslim, but I am saying that we can be better Muslims. We can improve on our Islam. And part of that too is having some conversations with yourself internally, and then having some conversation, formulating your thoughts and having conversations with a confidant, or plugging in, activating your micro support system, right? So this is where we are at this point. This is how we can kind of achieve something even better, right? And by all means, let's do so. Let's make this thing happen. Let's identify somebody who we cool with. Let's start formulating relationships. Let's get out our comfort zones, because at some point now we're just comfortable being in isolation or being lonely or being secluded. Keeping ourselves mum is the word, right? Practicing this mum effect, right? And I want everybody to remember this term that I'm using, the mum effect, M-U-M effect, right? That means keeping it silent, from the phrase mom is the word, right? And so we want to make sure that we have an understanding that we have to not be silent. And the only way that you can't be silent, you have to then start working towards communicating with other people, communicating how you feel, giving something back, retrieving something from it, and also giving something back, right? So we're going to see you guys next week. I actually think I have a pretty exciting guest that's coming on next week. I had the opportunity of meeting his brother at the Muslim marriage boot camp, the marriage boot camp that I happened to be a presenter in Delaware this past weekend, a couple of weekends ago. It was a great man. This is probably one of the better marriage boot camps and marriage seminars that I've seen put on in a long time. It was very well attended, and the speakers, the presenters were dynamic. No, they was hot off the press with it, and it was great. The love was great. The attendance was great. The feedback was great. The engagement and interaction was great. And hats off to my brother Imam Shadid Muhammad for putting on an excellent program, and look forward to many more of those programs taking place. Also in December, we also going to be in Baltimore for the winter conference. Also be a presenter at that, right? And so, let's continue to support each other. Let's continue to come out and support each other. At the end of the day, we all we got, y'all. Ain't nobody coming to help us rescue us from nothing. And if we're not doing it ourselves, who gonna do it for us? That's probably the problem. We've been waiting for somebody else to do this thing for us when we should be taking the lead on us and not letting anybody else and everybody else tell us how to move. Right. So you can catch me always on anything at the Hassan Clay Experience on Facebook, where this is being aired at Hassan Clay, on YouTube, the Hassan Clay Experience. Also on Instagram and TikTok. Please, by all means, connect with me there. And I've been liking how y'all been liking the reels and everything. I really appreciate that. We're gonna keep pushing this thing out there. Of course, check me out at my website, at HassanClay.net. And my book, Taming the Storm, is still out, still for sale. Oh my God, man, they bought me out up in Delaware. That was a pretty good thing. So I want you guys to, get the book. You know what I mean? It's fire, right? It's making it happen. So we get these type of conversations that we having right here in the book on how we can do something to be better, right? By all means, get the book. So with that, I'm going to end you out for this tonight. All right. And y'all have a great weekend or a great week. And we're going to see you guys here next Monday at 7 p.m. All right.